Hello and welcome back to Viper Bites as we continue to press on here through our training camp series here, previewing now the NFC West. Yes, that means the Arizona Cardinals, the Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams, the Seattle Seahawks, and the San Francisco 49ers are all on the clock. And yes, my love-hate relationship with Trey Lance may or may not get explained here. We'll see how I feel. But before we go into this, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, make sure if you're listening to us on any of those platforms, rate and review us. If you're watching us here on the Vipers Network, take a second, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and make sure you're tuning in for all the latest content that we got coming at you here right away. And head over to fantasypoints.com. If you like to save money, use promo code Vipers22 and get yourself 10% off that subscription today. Now, let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals first because, hey, first up, they're first on my show sheet because I did everything alphabetically. So let's talk about this Cardinals team here from a season ago. They started the season off winning 7 consecutive games, 8 of their first 9, before kind of going the opposite there, in which they lost 5 of the last 6 games, including a 34-11 loss at the hands of the Los Angeles Rams in that NFC wildcard round. Now, it's important for the Cardinals to keep Kyler Murray healthy and to keep him healthy for the whole season. The last couple seasons, we've kind of seen him tailor off towards the back end. So the Cardinals are going to want to make sure that they manage Murray from start to finish this year. Now, if they can do that, they can certainly improve on their 373.6 total yards per game, which was 8th best last year. Now, 2 noteworthy personnel type decisions here, moves made here in the offseason. DeAndre Hopkins, he is suspended for the first 6 games. You know the Cardinals knew this. They had a plan in their back pocket here. Enter Marquise Hollywood Brown, traded a first-round pick to the Baltimore Ravens and got themselves a former Oklahoma teammate of Kyler Murray's here in Brown. Now, for Kyler Murray, he was the only quarterback last year to play in less than 15 games and still be a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Yeah, that's saying something right there. Now, despite playing in only 14 games, Murray threw for 3,787 passing yards, which was the 14th most. 24 touchdowns to only 10 interceptions. He also added 5 more touchdowns on the ground, as well as 423 yards. That there is the reason why Kyler Murray feels that he should get paid. He is one of the more dynamic quarterbacks in the league. There's no question about that. But his situation here, his contract situation, is something worth monitoring as we get closer and closer to training camp actually kicking off. Now, he did wipe his whole social media kind of thing clean of Cardinals and kind of went through that whole process, but he was still out there at OTAs with his teammates, which is a pretty good sign that he's probably going to be there when camp fires up here in a couple weeks. Now, in 3 games that Murray missed last season, it was Colt McCoy who filled in, going 2-1, throwing for 3 touchdowns in those games, 684 yards, including a 328-yard performance in a victory over the Seattle Seahawks. It's probably a good thing McCoy is back because the next 2 quarterbacks on this depth chart, Trace McSorley and Jared Garantano, who are both long shots to make this roster at this time. Now, at running back, James Conner, he bullied his way to lead dog status of this Cardinals backfield in 2021. 752 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns. Yes, 15 touchdowns. Those 15 touchdowns, that was tied with Damian Harris for the second most on the ground, only trailing Jonathan Taylor and his 18 rushing scores. Behind Conner last year, Chase Edmonds, now with Miami. He ran the ball 116 times for 592 yards while catching 43 passes in just 12 games. Then you had Kyler Murray, who basically doubles as a backup running back as well because he can run the ball, as evident by those 423 yards and 5 touchdowns. This year, Eno Benjamin is the name to watch on this roster. He will look to earn a more prominent role going forward, especially compared to when he only had 34 carries a season ago. But he will be in tough in Arizona because they brought in a veteran here, Darrell 1L Williams. He came over from the Kansas City Chiefs, and rookie Keontae Ingram. They will also be competing for touches. With the signing of Williams, you have to assume Benjamin Ingram and Jonathan Ward, they're going to be battling it out for the last 2 back spots on this Cardinals roster as they look to only carry probably 4 when things end up all said and done. And wide receiver, it appears, like I said, Cardinals are going to be without Optimus Prime there. Get it? Optimus Prime, DeAndre Hopkins. You know what? Never mind. For the first 6 games, because of those PED suspensions there, you have to think the Cardinals, they knew about this going in, hence the reason why the decision to reunite Marquise Hollywood Brown with his college quarterback there and Kyler Murray. Probably an easy decision for Cardinals brass on that one. We've come to see this kind of this trending, whatever you want to call it here, of college quarterbacks reuniting with their college targets here. There's Burrow and Chase. That's worked out pretty good. Tagovailoa and Waddle had some nice moments. Even Derek Carr got his lead dog back out of Fresno State there in Devontae Adams. So, hey, so why not give Kyler Murray a friendly face to throw the ball to, as DeAndre Hopkins missed some time early on in the season. Now, Hopkins, he missed time last year too, so this is not a big surprise. We know the Cardinals can play without him. He played in only 10 games last year, but A.J. Green was adequate there. 96 targets, finishing with 848 yards, and he trailed only Christian Kirk in his 982 receiving yards. So in short, Green replaces Hopkins, Brown replaces Kirk. What does Rondale Moore do? Well, if you're looking at last year, nothing. But hey, the Cardinals are hot on him entering camp. So hopefully last season's 54 catch, 435-yard season there kind of increases here. It is important that for Moore to turn these heads in camp. We know the talent is there. Anyone who watched him at Purdue knows Moore is a difference maker on the field. If the Cardinals can find a way to manufacture touches into his hands, this is a team that can be absolutely dangerous on the offensive side of the ball. Brown right now, he may even see more than the 146 targets he saw last year in Hopkins' absence early on. Now at tight end, Arizona hasn't been afraid to make moves. We've seen that in the offseason, dealing that first-round pick to Marquise Brown. They went out a season ago there during the season, got Zach Ertz, who he came in, he recorded a bunch of receptions for the Cardinals, 56 of them in just 11 games, and he produced 574 yards along the way. While Ertz should feel like he's a starter, he must feel like history could be repeating itself here. Back in Philadelphia, the Eagles added a young stud there out of South Dakota State named Dallas Goedert, who eventually took over his job. In Arizona, they went out there and got probably the top tight end prospect in this year's draft in Trey McBride. So, hey, he's going to be looking over his shoulder here and there, but how involved will McBride be early on in camp? That is to be seen, but we know he's talented. Perhaps he's even more talented than Dallas Goedert. Just going to throw that out here right now. Now, Arizona's defense, it was pretty good last season. It finished 11th in total yards allowed per game with 329.2 yards per game against them, while limiting opposing offenses to 214.4 passing yards per game. Will Zach Allen or Dennis Gardnick be able to provide enough of a pass rush opposite of J.J. Watt to soften the loss of Chandler Jones and his 90 sacks since 2014? That's probably not going to happen, but hey, we'll see how it all shakes down. Let's talk about the Super Bowl champions here now. The Los Angeles Rams. The story of the Rams was one for a Hollywood script last season. They started the season winning 7 of their first 8 games. It truly was a fairy tale. Then the big bad wolf, he came knocking. Down went Robert Woods. That's tough. Then you seen, in true Hollywood fashion, they end up losing, struggling, going through some adversity there, losing some games. Bad Matthew Stafford showed his face. And then they started rebounding here, getting together, gelling before going on that Super Bowl run that eventually saw them defeat Arizona, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, and finally Cincinnati to win the Lombardi there. I talked about Matthew Stafford there. We talked about those first 8 games. He would throw for 2,477 yards and 22 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions during that stretch. That was good, Matty Stafford. Then bad Matt Stafford showed up over the next 7 games or so, in which he threw only 14 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. He did manage to throw for 1,862 yards in those 7 contests, but the struggle was real. Those windows were shrinking. And outside of the locker room, things were getting a little dicey there. Now, Stafford, he would go on to throw for the 3rd most passing yards in the NFL, 4,886, while being one of only 2 quarterbacks to throw for more than 40 touchdowns. Brady was the other one with 43. So, a lot of the pundits there in the media, they were taking shots at Matthew Stafford during that 7-game stretch. But when you look at the whole body of work from last season, it worked out pretty good for him. Behind Stafford last year, though, John Wolford, he was the number 2 quarterback there. He attempted 4 passes in 2021. Behind Wolford, you got Bryce Perkins, who isn't a threat to Wolford when it comes to holding the clipboard. At running back, LA, they were 25th in the league in rushing. Don't kid yourself. Even with Cam Akers coming back here, this is a pass-first type offense in Los Angeles. But when Akers went down, we know what happened there. He blew that Achilles. He ruptured it there. Right now, he's penciled in as the number 1 running back there, no matter how you want to look at it. He made it back somehow, some way for the Super Bowl run. But while he went down, it was Sony Michel who came over from the New England Patriots, who actually took over the lead dog responsibilities when Darrell Henderson's injuries and ineffectiveness started to add up. Michel would end up outperforming Henderson and leading this team in rushing last year with 845 yards. For the Rams, they must find a way to stay healthy. It's that simple. Henderson's going to be the number 2 back there behind Akers. It's how it's shaped up there. That said, Henderson, he didn't even make it out of OTAs without finding himself on the trainer's table with a soft tissue type injury. Henderson wasn't the only back to miss time either. Kyron Williams, a guy that they got out of the Notre Dame, he broke his foot. He had surgery, and he's missing some off-season reps. Luckily for the Rams, they still got a little bit of funk playing in that backfield right now. As Jake Funk took over, and he's going to take advantage of those extra opportunities. Those extra touches should give Funk a leg up on Williams heading into training camp. A wide receiver for the Rams, there is a very established pecking order in LA. It goes Cooper Kupp, then everyone else. Okay, the Rams, they dealt Robert Woods to the Titans in the offseason, and Odell Beckham Jr., he's still a free agent after tearing his ACL in the Super Bowl. Even if Odell Beckham Jr. signs and is ready to come back, he's not coming back until Christmas, which he could provide a pretty nice Christmas present to a contender down the road. Now, Sean McVay knew as good as Cooper Kupp is, Van Jefferson is not a true number 2, so they went out and signed Allen Robinson, who was coming off a down season with the hopes to rejuvenate his career in Hollywood. Whether you rank Randy Moss in his 2007 season or Jerry Rice in that 1987 season or even Calvin Johnson that 2012 season as the greatest season ever by a wide receiver, you have to include Cooper Kupp's 2021 campaign in any of these conversations. Kupp would go on to win the Triple Crown as far as wide receivers are concerned with 145 receptions, 1,947 yards, 16 touchdowns. It's also weird that one of the guys that we like to use as a whipping boy at the quarterback position, Matthew Stafford, was part of 2 of those 4 seasons there in Kupp's and Megatrons. Now, I really don't see how Kupp can do more. There's no way that Kupp can add extra targets there that are being vacated by Odell Beckham Jr. and Robert Woods and everything else. So Allen Robinson, coming off a season which he dealt from nagging injuries. By the way, injuries in California, they don't seem to quite hurt the same as they do in Chicago. I'll be honest with that. There's 117 targets vacated between Odell Beckham Jr. and Robert Woods, as well as 9 touchdowns and 861 yards. I don't think an 80-catch, 900-yard season, 8 touchdowns is too much to ask from Allen Robinson. I think that's kind of the floor when we're talking about his fantasy projection. Van Jefferson would finish last season with 50 catches on 89 targets, along with 6 touchdowns at 802 yards. If Robinson absorbs all that lost production from Woods and Beckham Jr., it is possible that he could also dip into Jefferson's. Those who wish to go even deeper on this depth chart for the Rams, it is very, very, very top heavy. Outside those top 3 options, you have a battle between guys like Ben Skoronnik, Tutu Atwell, Warren Jackson, and Brandon Powell. And we'll see how that all shakes out, because the way this Rams were hit last year a little bit, you did see these guys get a little bit of play and not do anything with it. Tight end, whether you want to believe it or not, Tyler Higbee has been one of the most consistent tight ends in the league. His 79% consistency ranking was the second highest among tight ends last season, finishing ahead of Travis Kelce and right behind Mark Andrews. And I get that information from the consistency guide that Bob Lung puts out there each and every year, so you're going to want to check that out as well. When you're looking at fantasy tight ends and how these points all come about, it's all about those touchdowns and those opportunities. When looking at routes run in the red zone, Higbee's 5.8, ranked 4th behind only Darren Waller, Kelce, and Dawson Knox. Higbee was essentially a non-factor during the playoffs after getting hurt in the NFC Championship. In that NFC Championship, Kendall Blanton would come in, haul in 5 passes for 57 yards, get himself hurt, and then not do much in the Super Bowl either. Jacob Harris, he's still there as very well, but I wouldn't rank him anywhere near the other 2. Defense, Aaron Donald, he thought about retiring, but hey, winning the Lombardi there and getting a 4-year extension, that might be enough to come back every once in a while. He got paid. He did well. This Rams defense, they're still learning. They're bringing back Leonard Floyd. They're bringing a guy like Bobby Wagner there, another all-pro. They got another all-pro there in the back end, Jalen Ramsey. I mean, there is all-pros everywhere on this defense. If there is one camp battle that you want to watch, it's going to go between Justin Hollins and Terrell Lewis for that second outside linebacker opposite of Leonard Floyd. For San Francisco, the 49ers, the offseason has created more questions than answers. Can Trey Lance be the guy? He seems to be polarizing the whole fantasy community, the NFL draft community. Every kind of community has varying degrees of opinions on Trey Lance and what he can do this year. When we look at this, will he be an improvement under center from a team that finished 7th in total yards a season ago under Jimmy Garoppolo? We know Jimmy can't throw that ball down the field like Trey Lance can. We've watched, that deep ball accuracy from Jimmy Garoppolo, it just wasn't there. Especially when you take a look at what he did in the playoffs there in those NFC championship games. Yeah, that's probably the reason why Garoppolo is probably on the outside looking in right now. 43 of 75, 535 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That's not how you get to the Super Bowl. Jimmy Garoppolo, he's been there, so give him a little bit of credit. Now, when we look into this quarterback position a little bit more, Garoppolo, he is recovering from that shoulder surgery that resulted in some damaged goods, preventing the 49ers from finding themselves a trade partner, potentially. Now, which ultimately led to him being excused from OTAs. Will the 49ers or Garoppolo be able to find a trade partner prior to OTAs or training camp kicking off? That's to be seen. Or will the 49ers have to outright release them and receive nothing back but the memories? Someone in San Francisco believes in Lance, or they never would have traded all that draft capital in order to move up and select him back in the 2001 entry draft. With Lance and the 49ers, they have a quarterback that oozes that potential. But the results, they haven't been there. And the NFL is a what have you done for me lately type business. We've seen some good things from him early on in his career. He's been able to run the ball. He is able to throw the ball. It's important to note that former offensive coordinator Mike McDaniel, he left his post in San Francisco to pursue a head coaching gig there with the Dolphins in Miami. If Garoppolo is truly out of the picture, this becomes Trey Lance's team. Make no mistake about it. Nate Sudfeld, Brock Purdy, they're in tow. There's nothing pretty about either one of them. Lance, he doesn't have to look over his shoulder with either one of those guys there. But if Jimmy Garoppolo is there, that could, not only is Jimmy a good-looking dude, but he's going to put a little bit of pressure on Trey Lance, and we'll see how Trey Lance responds if Garoppolo is still there when it's all said and done. How does he affect guys like Deebo Samuel and Elijah Mitchell in this offense? Hold on to that thought. Remember this time last year, people were burying Elijah Mitchell on this team's depth chart, absolutely burying him behind Jeffrey Wilson, Raheem Mostert, and even Trey Sermon. Through a series of events and injuries, Mitchell climbed to the top of the depth chart and once again made the most of his opportunities. In 11 games, Mitchell ran for 963 yards, averaging 4.7 yards per carry while adding 137 more yards in the passing game. Fast forward 2022. Mitchell is the king of the Golden Gate Bridge, once more with camp battle brewing right behind him. That battle involves Wilson, Sermon, and now the rookie out of LSU, Tyron Davis-Price, which some believe, hey, he may even take Elijah Mitchell. So we're still not giving Elijah Mitchell the respect that he deserves. San Francisco, they know what they have in Wilson. I was on record last year saying the combination of Mitchell and Sermon were drafted to replace Wilson and Mostert last year. Mostert, he's already gone. He went to Miami. While Wilson, he's probably going to give way to Davis-Price at some point here. So I would not expect Wilson to factor in too much here moving forward. Shanahan, he wants to get athletes on the field. He wants to manufacture touches. This is how this offense works. Davis is more than capable of doing that. I still believe Sermon is a talented back. However, if injuries and inefficiency creep up in his game, look for Davis-Price to capitalize. Now, looking at the wide receivers here, perhaps the biggest question this offseason involves Deebo Samuel and his trade demand. I'm far from an expert in the ongoings here, but I would like to think that 0% chance that he gets traded. There's no way San Francisco is trading Deebo Samuel, but then again, we've seen guys like Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, these guys get traded, so no one's untradeable, right? We know Samuel, he wants to get paid. He wants to get paid as a wide receiver. He wants to secure that big back. He's maybe not the best wide receiver. He's not the best running back, but he's the best football player, especially as far as fantasy is going and what he can do for an offense. Now, Samuel, he did it all. I just mentioned that. 1,435 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, 356 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns. If you subtract what he did as a running back, he would still have finished as a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. We have seen in the past that if Samuel and or George Kittle were to miss time, it's Brandon Ayuk who steps up. Ayuk started the season slowly, failing to record more than 50 yards in any game prior to the November 7th contest against the Cardinals. That is 7 games of futility right there, mostly because Kittle and Samuel were there. So hence, those guys in, Ayuk takes a back seat. One of those goes down, Ayuk, he steps up. Now, next on the depth chart here, as far as the wide receivers go, let's take a look at this offense. With Lance under center, if he is uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form, this is how it's going to affect the passing game. He is not going to throw that ball. He's going to tuck it and run, which could absolutely dip into Deebo Samuel's production. You're going to see an increase in Trey Lance's running, which we love that as that Konami Code type quarterback there, picking up those extra run yards. But that's going to hurt things all over, which could bode well for a big play body like Jawan Jennings. More of a blocking type tight end. He could get some more reps out there. You got Danny Gray there. You got Marcus Johnson. He's coming over from the Titans. So there are some pass catchers available for the 49ers that are outside of Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. And George Kittle. And George Kittle is an interesting case himself. He needs to stay healthy. We all know the rigors of the tight end position and how the wear and the tear works down on that body, and the likelihood of injuries increases on the shoulders and hands. And we've seen that with George Kittle over the last couple seasons. Kittle suffered from a few different ailments last year in 2021, missing 3 games with that calf injury. Even he missed some time. He still managed to command 94 targets, in which he turned into 910 receiving yards, which was the 4th most amongst the tight end position. Battling out behind Kittle, man, you got Tyler Kroft there versus Ross Dwelley, with neither of them looking very appealing. As far as their defense goes, the 49ers were an elite defense last year, finishing 6th in the passing yards allowed at 206.5 and 7th in rushing yards allowed per game at 103.5. Fred Warner, he's back, his 137 tackles. Azeez Al-Shaair, his 102. They led the team in tackles, kind of back and forth there. They did this without Drew Greenlaw in there. So Drew Greenlaw or Al-Shaair, who's going to get those reps? Shaair, he's earned himself that opportunity. Let's be honest. And we all know Nick Bosa is the guy that makes this defense run here, getting that pass rush going on there. But can Dee Ford contribute in any way, shape, or form? Or will Drake Jackson make him absolutely expendable? I'm betting on Drake Jackson when it's all said and done. For the Seattle Seahawks, when we talk about teams that we have no clue what's going on, Seattle has to be the first team that comes to your mind. After trading Russell Wilson to Denver in a deal that netted the return of Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, Drew Lock, Charles Cross, if you had that draft pick in there, and some other pieces, we have no idea what life without Wilson will look like in 2022. Actually, we do. It's Geno Smith from last year, and it's not good. We have ourselves a true quarterback battle brewing here in Seattle, and we could potentially toss in Baker Mayfield into this whole discussion too. Geno Smith, Drew Lock, Baker Mayfield. It's a very real possibility, especially if the Browns were to release him prior to training camp. Geno Smith, he saw action in 4 games last year when Wilson was unavailable. Over those 4 games, the Seahawks would lose 3 of them, with their only win coming against the Jacksonville Jaguars. To Smith's credit, he wasn't horrible, and he knew his role. He force-fed DK Metcalf and pretty much ignored Tyler Lockett in all but one of those games. Smith would go on to complete 68.4% of his passes for 702 yards, averaging a respectable 7.4 yards per attempt with 5 touchdowns and 1 lone pick. Drew Lock, on the other hand, last year, he was in a battle with Teddy Bridgewater in Denver, and he was relegated to bench duties, seeing action only 6 contests. In those 6 contests there, he would throw for 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 67 for 111 passing, resulting in 787 yards. Yeah, can't get behind that either, man. I'm not sure if either Smith or Locke is the guy in 2022. I mean, if Baker Mayfield finds himself there, this is we're not having this conversation. Mayfield will be the guy in Seattle if he ends up there. I do know that neither guy, they're coming back in 2023. We know Locke won't be there. We know Smith's not going to be there in 2023. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if the Seattle Seahawks starting quarterback in 2022 is on another team's roster right now, whether it's college or somewhere else here in the pros. Running back Rashawn Penny just can't seem to catch a break. After years of not meeting expectations, battling injuries, and having to bide his time behind Chris Carson, he finally got a chance to perform, and he did it well. He really did. And what happens? Seattle goes off and they draft Kenneth Walker, one of the top running back prospects in this year's draft. Penny was more efficient last year, recording 10% more yards per touch than even Jonathan Taylor, earning an extra little bit of coin in his pocket ahead of this season there, with 135 rushing yards in 4 of his last 5 games. Listen to this: 190, 170, 135, 39, and 137. That's how his last 5 games of the season went as far as rushing production was concerned. Yet here we are talking about Penny battling for touches once again with a talented rookie. And if Chris Carson returns, not very optimistic, that adds a new wrench into this whole thing. Further to Penny's success last season, 6.3 yards per carry was the best in the NFL. I think Seattle extending Penny on that one-year deal means he's the guy for 2022, but Walker is the future. And if Penny gets hurt, there may not be any touches for him when he returns. A wide receiver, can Seattle and DK Metcalf get this contract situation kind of figured out before camp kicks off? Metcalf, he missed the mandatory part of mini camp there as contract negotiations failed to yield a new deal. When looking at both Metcalf and Lockett and how they performed with Smith under center in those 4 games, for Metcalf, 19 passes, 296 yards, 5 touchdowns. Lockett would haul in 21 passes for 246, but 12 of those catches and 142 yards came against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, throughout camp, we will be watching to see whether Smith or Lockett develop any kind of chemistry with the Seattle Seahawks Pro Bowl type receivers here. After Lockett and Metcalf, who else is in there? Who's going to earn that role in the slot? Is it going to be Freddie Swain? Is it going to be D. Eskridge? Swain has twice as many targets, but also played in 7 more games last year than the second-year wideout out of Western Michigan. Some may also be watching Marquise Goodwin here to see if he still has anything left to offer here. But keep your eye on some sleeper-type receivers here. Bo Melton and Derek Young. These are 2 young names you want to make sure you have on your radar ahead of the 2022 season. At tight end, Mr. Noah Fant. He gives the Seahawks a significant upgrade at the tight end position. Seattle's newest fantasy-relevant pass catcher has proven to be a valuable asset in the passing game in hauling 40 or more passes in each of the first 3 seasons, while also finished with 550 or more receiving yards and 3 scores. After Fant, we are looking at like Will Dissly here and Colby Parkinson, who inspire a little fear in opposing defenses. Speaking of those defenses, for Seattle was the 5th worst in total yards per game allowed in 2021, allowing 379.1 per contest, with most of that being put on the pass defense that surrendered 265 yards per game, which was the 2nd worst. Jordan Brooks will look to build upon a defense here that lost all-pro middle linebacker Bobby Wagner. Now, we know that Brooks is ready to lead. Even last year, he finished with 109 solo tackles, 184 total tackles, which were more than what Bobby Wagner was able to accumulate. So the middle of this defense is in good hands with Jordan Brooks, but it's going to take a whole lot more than Brooks to make this defense formidable in 2022. With that all said, you've been catching here on the Viper Bites, the latest NFC breakdown for the training camp. So make sure you tune in, because after this, we're heading to the AFC with more NFL training camp previews coming your way.